The evacuation moved like a machine. No panic, no chaos. Just calm, steady work. Day after day, system after system. Humanity packed up and left with the kind of quiet discipline that made the other species nervous, though most of them would not admit it. Captain Diane Marsh stood on the command deck of Helix Station and watched her crew dismantle the last of the atmospheric processors. Helix was the largest joint research facility that humans and Valith had ever built together. It orbited a gas giant on the edge of Valith space, and for 15 years it had been a symbol of cooperation between the two species. Now it was being stripped bare. Diane's team worked fast. They pulled out power cores, disconnected sensor arrays, and loaded crates of equipment onto transport shuttles. Everything that humanity had designed, funded, or built was coming with them. What remained would be an empty shell. Sub-Commander Tehran of the Valith watched from the far side of the deck. He was younger than most Valith officers Diane had worked with, and he had always been polite, even friendly. He walked over to her now, with his 4 eyes blinking in confusion. "Captain Marsh," he said, "is this truly necessary? Surely this is just a political display. Your people will return once the disagreement is settled." Diane looked at him. She had liked Tehran. They had shared meals together, worked through difficult research problems side by side, and once he had even helped her fix a broken relay during a power failure. But that was before. "No, Tehran," she said, "this is us leaving. But the work we have done here, the research, the progress, was built on trust," Diane said, "and your council broke that." Tehran opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. He looked around the deck, at the empty spaces where human equipment had been. The walls were marked with outlines, where consoles and panels had once sat. It looked like a body with its organs removed. "Where will you go?" Tehran asked. Diane did not answer. She picked up her bag, nodded once to him, and walked to the shuttle bay. Back on Earth, the mood was different. There was anger, of course. The streets of every major city had seen protests in the first week after the news broke. People burned council flags and chanted slogans. But the anger quickly turned into something harder, something colder, a sense of purpose. Admiral Greg Patterson stood before the United Earth Parliament in a closed session. The chamber was full. Every seat was taken. Cameras were off. What was said in this room would not leave it. Patterson introduced Dr. Kevin Holt, a thin man with round glasses and a nervous habit of tapping his fingers on whatever surface was closest. Kevin was the head of the Defense Research Institute, and he had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. "Members of Parliament," Kevin began, "for the past 20 years, my team has been developing a project under the highest level of classification. We call it Veil Strike." He tapped his datapad, and a holographic display appeared above the chamber floor. It showed a network of satellites, platforms, and relay nodes spread across a vast area of space. "Veil Strike is a stealth and denial system," Kevin continued. "It uses a combination of sensor-dampening fields, subspace frequency disruptors, and gravitational lensing technology to render entire star systems invisible to any known form of detection. Conventional scanners, quantum sensors, hyperwave relays, none of them can penetrate it. When Veil Strike is active, anything inside its coverage area simply does not exist as far as the rest of the galaxy is concerned." The chamber was very quiet. "You are saying," said the Speaker of Parliament slowly, "that we can make ourselves disappear." "Yes," Kevin said, "completely." Patterson stepped forward. "We began Veil Strike because we always knew this day might come. We hoped it would not. We planned as if it would. The system is ready for full deployment. All we need is your authorization." The vote was unanimous. Every single member of Parliament raised their hand. There was no debate, no discussion, no objections. Veil Strike was activated 3 days later. But before the cloak fell, Laura Beckett had one more thing to do. She sat in a small recording studio in the basement of the Earth Embassy on Luna. The room was plain, a single camera pointed at her. Behind her was nothing but a gray wall. She wore no uniform, no formal clothes, just a simple dark jacket. She wanted to look like exactly what she was, a person speaking the truth. The broadcast went out on every open galactic channel. Every species with a receiver heard it. Every station, every ship, every colony. Laura spoke clearly and without emotion. This is Ambassador Laura Beckett of the United Earth Government. I am addressing every species in the Galactic Interspecies Council. She paused. 6 weeks ago, the Council voted to strip humanity of its sovereign territory. This vote was the result of a secret agreement called the Partition Accords, negotiated over 3 years by the 5 senior species without humanity's knowledge or consent. I have released the full, unredacted text of these accords on all public channels. You may read them for yourselves. She looked directly into the camera. We are not going to fight you. We are not going to beg. Every human being in Council space is coming home. Every ship, every station, every signal. When this broadcast ends, you will not hear from us again. Laura leaned forward slightly. But I have one last thing to say. We know what is coming. We have known for years. Something is moving at the edge of the galaxy. Something that does not negotiate, does not trade, and does not stop. We were building defenses. We were preparing early warning systems. We were going to protect everyone, including you. Her voice did not waver. We will not be doing that now. Our systems go dark with us. Our warnings go silent. You are on your own. She let that sink in for a moment. So here's our parting gift. The only mercy we will offer. Hide. The broadcast ended. The screen went black. Within 6 hours, every human signal in the galaxy vanished. Ships stopped transmitting. Beacons went offline. The frequencies that had carried human voices for 60 years fell silent. The galaxy was suddenly a much emptier, much quieter place. And in the silence, something far away began to move. 6 months after humanity disappeared, the Valith threw a celebration. They called it the Reclamation Festival. On Nexus Prime, the council chamber was decorated with banners from the 11 species that had voted in favor of the Partition Accords. High Arbiter Zorvan gave a speech about the dawn of a new era, about fairness and balance and the proper distribution of galactic resources. He spoke for nearly an hour. The delegates applauded politely. Nobody mentioned the humans. It was as if they had never existed. The Valith wasted no time moving into former human space. Fleets of mining ships and colony transports jumped into systems that had once belonged to Earth. They expected to find brevium-rich planets waiting for them, fully mapped and ready for extraction. What they found instead was nothing. The planets were there. The stars still burned. But everything else was gone. Every mine had been sealed with hardened alloy plugs driven deep into the rock. Every colony had been stripped down to bare foundations. Every navigational beacon had been wiped clean. Even the orbital markers were gone. The Valith ships floated through empty systems like visitors wandering through a house where the previous owners had taken the furniture, the walls, and the floor. But the real problem was not what was missing. The real problem was what could not be found. Every long-range sensor sweep came back empty. Every deep space scan showed nothing. The Valith could not find a single human ship, station, or signal anywhere in the galaxy. It was as if 3 billion people and their entire civilization had simply stopped existing. Zorvan was not worried, not at first. He assumed the humans were hiding in their home systems, sulking. He ordered a scout fleet to investigate. 40 warships under the command of Fleet Leader jumped into the Sol Corridor, the traditional route to Earth's home system, They never came back. There was no battle, no distress signal, no wreckage detected on any scanner. 40 warships simply entered the corridor and ceased to exist. Every attempt to contact them failed. Every probe sent after them vanished the same way. Now Zorvan was worried. He sent another fleet. 60 ships this time, with the best sensors the Valith had. They approached the Sol corridor from a different angle, moving slowly, scanning constantly. They disappeared too. Panic began to spread through the council. The Torvan Union demanded answers. The Dressa Federation pulled its ships back to its own borders. Even the species who had voted in favor of the Accords began to whisper that perhaps they had made a mistake. Zorvan held an emergency session of the council. He stood at his podium and declared that humanity was using some form of illegal weapon technology and that the council would respond with force. His voice was confident. His 4 eyes were not. Meanwhile, far from the council's reach, the Rathani collective was taking a different approach. The Rathani had been one of the 4 species that abstained from the vote. They were a quiet, cautious people, and they had always maintained a respectful relationship with humanity. Now they were afraid, and afraid species look for friends. They sent a small envoy ship to the last known human communication relay, a small satellite drifting in a dead system on the edge of what had been human space. The relay was dark, like everything else, but the Rathani transmitted a message anyway, a simple request for contact. 3 days later, a woman appeared. Her name was Lena Price. She was young, no more than 30, with short brown hair and steady dark eyes. She arrived in a small ship with no markings, no transponder signal, and no weapons that the Rathani scanners could detect. She docked with their envoy vessel and stepped aboard as calmly as if she were walking into a meeting room. The Rathani ambassador, a small creature with feathered arms and large golden eyes, greeted her nervously. "We are grateful you came. We did not know if anyone would hear us." Lena sat down across from him. "I heard you. I have been here the whole time." "Here? In this system?" "Close enough." The ambassador shifted in his seat. "We need to understand what is happening. Your people have vanished. Valith fleets have disappeared. There are rumors of a weapon." Lena shook her head. "We did not destroy those fleets. We simply relocated them. They are alive, but they will not be coming back until we decide to let them. Think of it as a long detention." The ambassador blinked. Why did Ambassador Beckett warn us to hide? What is coming? Lena was quiet for a moment. She folded her hands on the table and looked at the Rathani with an expression that was not angry or cold. It was sad. 23 years ago, she said, our deep space monitoring network detected an anomaly at the far edge of the galaxy. A mass migration of biological entities moving inward. We studied them for years. We sent probes. We analyzed their behavior, their biology, their patterns of movement. She paused. We call them the Cathara. They are a swarm species. They do not build. They do not communicate. They do not negotiate. They move from system to system, and they consume everything. Planets, stations, ships, organic matter, energy, all of it. They strip a system bare and move on. They have destroyed civilizations that were old before the Valith learned to make fire. The ambassador's feathers flattened against his body. How large is the swarm? Billions of individual organisms, spread across a front that is currently about 400 light-years wide. They will reach the outer edges of Council space within a year. Silence filled the room. We were building defenses, Lena continued. Early warning networks, barrier systems, weapons designed to target their biology. We were going to protect the whole galaxy. That was the plan. And now? Lena looked at him steadily. Now those systems are offline. Our warning network is dark. Our barrier stations are inside the Veil Strike cloak. When the Cathara arrive, the Council will have no advance warning and no specialized defenses. The ambassador's voice was barely a whisper. "You are going to let them come." "We warned you to hide," Lena said. "That was not a threat, it was advice." The Rithani envoy returned to the council and delivered the message word for word. Zorvan listened, then stood and declared it a bluff, a desperate lie designed to frighten the council into giving humanity its territory back. He called the Cathara a fairy tale and ordered the matter sealed from public discussion. The council members nodded and went back to their comfortable lives. 3 weeks later, the outer colonies of the Valith Dominion stopped responding to communication signals. One by one, like lights going out along a road at night, they went dark. And this time, it was not the humans. The first reports were confused. A Valith border patrol found a colony world that had been green and full of life just 2 weeks earlier. Now, it was brown. The oceans were gone. The atmosphere was thin and toxic. The surface looked like it had been scraped clean by a giant hand. 6 million Valith had lived there. There were no bodies, no ruins, no signs of battle, just bare, dead rock. Then it happened again, and again. Within 2 weeks, 9 Valith outer colonies had been consumed. The pattern was always the same. Communications would go silent. A patrol would be sent. They would find a dead world. Sometimes they would find a swarm still feeding, a vast cloud of dark shapes covering the planet like a living blanket, each organism no larger than a dog, but numbering in the hundreds of millions. The patrols that found active swarms did not come back. The Valith Navy mobilized. They gathered their best ships, their most experienced commanders, and their most powerful weapons. 200 warships formed a battle line at Sorvan Reach, a choke point between the outer colonies and the inner systems. It was the largest military formation the Valith had assembled in 3 centuries. The Cathara came through like water through a broken dam. The swarm did not fight the way any known species fought. There were no formations, no tactics, no command structure. They simply poured forward in an endless wave of dark, shittering bodies. They latched onto ship hulls and began eating through them. They clogged engine intakes. They swarmed over shields until the shields overloaded and collapsed. Weapons fire killed thousands of them, but thousands more took their place instantly. The Battle of Sorvan Reach lasted 11 minutes. 200 Valith warships were reduced to drifting husks of chewed metal. The few escape pods that launched were caught and consumed before they could clear the debris field. The galaxy watched in horror. High Arbiter Zorvan went on every channel and declared a state of emergency. He called on all council species to unite their fleets and stand together against the swarm. But it was already too late for unity. The Torvan Union, whose territory bordered the Valith outer colonies, was hit next. Their fleet was smaller and older. They fought bravely. They lasted a week. By the end of it, the Torvan homeworld was a stripped ball of rock, and the Torvan species existed only as scattered refugees on borrowed ships, heading in every direction. The Dressa Federation tried a different approach. They abandoned their outer systems without a fight, and pulled everything back to their core worlds, hoping to create a dense, defensive perimeter. The Cathara did not care about defensive perimeters. They simply went around them, consumed the supply lines, and then closed in from every direction. The Dressa lasted 12 days. Species after species fell. The galactic map, once full of colored territories and trade routes, began to go dark. Refugee fleets clogged the remaining safe corridors. Distress signals filled every frequency, overlapping and blending into a constant wall of noise. Pleas for help, for shelter, for someone, anyone, to do something. Nobody could do anything. Zorvan sat in his quarters aboard his last remaining flagship, a battle-scarred cruiser called the Vigilance. He had aged 10 years and 2 months. His gray skin hung loose on his frame. His 4 eyes were dull and tired. Around him, aides and officers argued about where to run, where to hide, whether there was anywhere left in the galaxy that the swarm had not reached. He silenced them with a raised hand. Then he opened a broadcast on every frequency he could reach. Not just council channels. Every frequency, including the ones that humans had once used. His voice was hoarse when he spoke. "This is High Arbiter Zorvan of the Valeth Dominion. I am addressing the people of Earth. I am addressing any human who can hear this." He paused and took a breath. "We were wrong. The partition accords were an act of greed and arrogance. We took what was not ours. We ignored your warnings. We called your ambassador a liar. We dismissed the Cathara as a fairy tale." His voice cracked. "They are not a fairy tale. They are here, and they are destroying everything. My people are dying. All people are dying. Worlds that stood for thousands of years are gone. I have nothing left to offer you but the truth, and the truth is that we were fools." He leaned forward. "Please, I beg you, help us. Whatever you want, it is yours. Territory, resources, authority. Just help us survive this." The broadcast echoed across the galaxy. It bounced off dead relays and empty stations. It traveled through the silence where human voices had once been. There was no response. On Earth, in the deep underground war room of the Defense Command, Admiral Greg Patterson stood with his arms folded and watched Zorvan's broadcast play on the main screen. Beside him stood Rear Admiral Nathan Cole and Dr. Kevin Holt. Nathan watched Zorvan's face. He remembered standing in the council chamber, being told that human territory was never truly theirs. He remembered the vote, 11-0. "He sounds sincere," Nathan said quietly. "He is sincere," Patterson replied. "He is also desperate. Those are not the same thing." Kevin adjusted his glasses. "The swarm has consumed roughly 32% of council space. At their current rate of advance, they will reach the inner council systems within 4 months. After that, there will be very little left." Nathan turned to Patterson. "Admiral, should we respond?" Patterson looked at the screen for a long time. He watched the flickering distress signals from a dozen dying worlds. He watched the map update in real time as another system went dark. "Not yet," he said. "Let them understand what they threw away. Let them feel what it is like to call for help and hear nothing." He turned away from the screen. "But start preparing the fleet. When we go with everything." Meanwhile, on the edge of Cathara-occupied space, Captain Diane Marsh sat in the command chair of the stealth carrier Phantom Ridge. Her ship was invisible, hidden inside a portable veil-strike bubble that made it look like empty space to every sensor in existence. She had been here for weeks, watching the swarm move, recording everything. She watched a Cathara cluster consume a small moon. Millions of organisms landed on its surface and began breaking it down, molecule by molecule. The process took less than a day. When they were done, the moon was a cloud of dust, and the swarm had grown slightly larger. Diane made notes in her log. Entry 47. The Cathara feed in predictable cycles. They swarm a target, consume it over a period of 6 to 30 hours, depending on mass. Then enter a dormant phase of approximately 4 hours, before moving to the next target. During the dormant phase, they cluster together and become nearly stationary. Their outer shells harden, and their energy output drops to almost nothing. She tapped her chin with her pen. They are not invincible. They are just hungry. And hunger has patterns. She encrypted the log and sent it through the Veilstrike network back to Earth. Somewhere, on the other end, people were reading her reports and building plans around them. Diane looked out the viewport at the swarm drifting in the darkness. Billions of organisms, stretching across the void like a living storm cloud. "We are coming for you," she whispered. "Just not today." The order came on a Tuesday. Admiral Greg Patterson stood in the war room, surrounded by holographic maps that showed the devastation across the galaxy. nearly 40% of Council space was gone. Entire civilizations had been wiped from existence. Refugee fleets drifted through the remaining safe zones with nowhere to go. The Cathara swarm continued to push inward, unstoppable and endless. Patterson looked at the maps for a long time. Then he picked up his communicator and spoke 2 words that would change the course of galactic history. Deploy all. Across human space, the Veil Strike network opened a single corridor. It was like a curtain being pulled back on a stage, and what it revealed made every sensor in the galaxy light up at once. 3,000 warships, carriers, dreadnoughts, destroyers, frigates, and support vessels, all of them arranged in perfect formation. They had been built in secret, armed with weapons the galaxy had never seen, and crewed by men and women who had spent months training for exactly this moment. The United Earth Fleet filled the corridor like a river of steel and light. At the head of the formation, Rear Admiral Nathan Cole stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Iron Perseverance. It was the largest ship humanity had ever built. Its hull was reinforced with brevium alloy. Its weapon systems were powered by brevium cores that could produce energy bursts specifically tuned to disrupt Cathara biology. Nathan had studied every one of Diane Marsh's observation reports. He knew the swarm's feeding cycles, dormant phases, clustering patterns, and weak points. He had wargamed this fight 100 times. Now it was real. All ships, this is Rear Admiral Cole, Nathan said over the fleet channel. His voice was calm and steady. We have trained for this. We have prepared for this. The galaxy turned its back on us, and we are going to save it anyway. Not because they deserve it. Because we can. Move out. The fleet jumped. They hit the Cathara at the edge of what had once been Torvan space. The swarm was in a feeding phase, spread across 3 systems, consuming the remains of a destroyed civilization. They did not expect resistance. For months, everything they had encountered had either fled or died. Humanity did neither. The brevium core weapons fired in synchronized volleys. Each blast sent out a pulse of energy that tore through Cathara organisms at the molecular level. The creatures convulsed, broke apart, and disintegrated in clouds of dark ash. For the first time since the swarm had entered Council space, they lost ground. The Cathara tried to adapt. They swarmed toward the human ships the way they had swarmed the Valith fleet at Sorvan Reach, pouring forward in a massive wave of chittering bodies. But the human ships were ready. Point defense systems sprayed the space around each vessel with brevium-laced rounds, creating kill zones that no organism could cross. The Cathara hit these zones and died in their millions. Still, they kept coming. The sheer volume of the swarm was staggering. Nathan watched his tactical display as wave after wave crashed against the fleet's defenses. Ships took damage. Shields flickered. The cruiser Bright Morning lost its port engine array when a cluster of Cathara bored through the hull plating before the point defense could respond. 23 crew members died. Nathan gritted his teeth. Push forward. Do not stop. Captain Diane Marsh joined the battle 3 hours in. Her observation data was being fed directly to the fleet's tactical computers, and she guided the formation to exploit every weakness she had found. When the swarm entered a dormant phase between feedings, she flagged it instantly. All ships, dormant cluster detected in grid 77. Duration approximately 4 hours. They are stationary and hardened. Deploy stillfield generators. Dr. Kevin Holt's greatest invention went to work. The stillfield generators were massive devices carried by specialized support ships. When activated, they created zones of dead space, areas where no energy transfer could occur. Inside a stillfield, the Cathara could not feed, they could not move, they could not reproduce, they simply starved. The generators deployed across the battlefront, carving out pockets of dead space that trapped billions of Cathara organisms. The swarm began to fracture. For the first time, it was not advancing, it was retreating. The war lasted 4 months. It was not easy. Humanity lost ships, humanity lost people. The destroyer Cold River was consumed when it strayed too far from the formation. The carrier Pale Dawn was crippled by a swarm cluster and had to be evacuated. 209 men and women died in the Battle of the Vesan Nebula alone. But humanity pushed forward. System by system, sector by sector, they drove the Kethera back. Diane's patterns held. Kevin Stillfield's worked. Nathan's tactics adapted faster than the swarm could evolve. And behind the front lines, human engineers began rebuilding early warning stations and defensive networks in the recovered systems. On the day the last Kethera cluster was pushed beyond the galactic rim, Nathan Cole stood on the bridge of the Iron Perseverance and watched it go. The swarm retreated into the void between galaxies, diminished and fractured, driven out by a species that had every reason to let the galaxy burn, and chose not to. Nathan was tired. He had not slept properly in months. His uniform hung loose on his frame. But when his communications officer told him that the Council had requested his presence on Nexus Prime, he straightened his back, fixed his collar, and went. The Council chamber was half empty. Many of the tiered seats had no one to sit in them. The Torvon seats were vacant. The Dressa seats were vacant. Several other species had been reduced to scattered survivors, with no formal government left to send representatives. Zorvan was there. He sat in his usual place at the highest tier, but he looked like a different person. His gray skin was pale. His robes were wrinkled. His 4 eyes followed Nathan as he walked to the central podium. Nathan placed a single datapad on the podium. It contained the terms of a new treaty. He did not read them out loud. He simply let it sit there and looked up at the chamber. "This is not a negotiation," he said. "This is how things are going to be." The treaty was straightforward. Humanity would help rebuild the galaxy. They would share their defensive technology and maintain a permanent early warning network against future threats. In return, the partition accords were annulled. All human territory was restored. The Council would be restructured so that no group of species could ever again vote to take another's home. And every decision that affected a member species' sovereignty would require that species' consent. Zorvan read the terms. He did not argue. He did not bargain. He signed. Then he looked at Nathan and asked, in a voice barely above a whisper, "Why did you come back, after everything we did to you?" Nathan looked at him for a long time. He thought about the vote, 11-0. He thought about being escorted out of this very chamber like a criminal. He thought about the Cold River, and the Pale Dawn, and the 209 people who died at Vesan Nebula. "And you made sure it could only be us." Behind him, Laura Beckett stepped forward. She had been waiting at the edge of the chamber, watching in silence. Now she activated the broadcast system one more time. Every channel, every frequency, every corner of the galaxy. Her voice was the same as it had been in that small studio on Luna, clear and calm and certain. "To every species, on every world, in every corner of this galaxy, we are humanity. We were betrayed, abandoned, and cast out. And we came back anyway, not because you deserved it, but because that is who we are." She paused. "Next time, when we say hide, you will listen." The broadcast ended. The chamber was silent. Zorvan sat with his head bowed. The remaining delegates stared at the podium where the datapad sat, its terms now the new law of the galaxy. Nathan turned and walked out of the chamber. Diane Marsh was waiting in the corridor with Kevin Holt. The 4 of them walked together toward the shuttle bay, their footsteps echoing through the quiet halls of Nexus Prime. Behind them, the galaxy began to rebuild. Ahead of them, the stars burned on. And humanity, as it always had, kept moving forward. Nathan Cole stood at the viewport of the ardent horizon and stared at the massive orbital station floating ahead of them. Nexus Prime, the political heart of the Galactic Interspecies Council. He had been coming here for 7 years as a diplomatic commander, shaking hands with aliens, smiling at ceremonies, and pretending that humanity had a real seat at the table. But today was different. Today he had proof that the table had been built on lies. His communicator buzzed. Laura Beckett's face appeared on the screen. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were red, and her hair was pulled back in a messy knot. But her voice was sharp and clear. "I have everything, Nathan," she said. "Encrypted files, audio recordings, internal memos, all of it. The Valith have been planning this for over 3 years. They call it the Partition Accords." Nathan felt his stomach drop. He had suspected something was wrong for months. Valith diplomats whispering in corners. Council votes that always seemed to go against human interests, by just enough to look like bad luck. But this was worse than anything he had imagined. Laura explained it quickly. The 5 senior species of the Council, led by the Valith Dominion, had signed a secret agreement. They were going to divide up all of human-controlled space among themselves. Every colony, every outpost, every mining world. In exchange, the Valith would get exclusive access to brevium, a rare and powerful element found only in human territory. The other species would get land, resources, and the satisfaction of putting humanity in its place. "They did not even argue about it," Laura said quietly. "They just divided us up like a piece of meat." Nathan closed his eyes for a moment. Then he opened them. "Can you present it to the full assembly?" "Yes." "Then let us go." The council chamber was enormous. It was a circular room carved into the center of Nexus Prime, with tiered seating for representatives of over 100 species. The ceiling was a dome of transparent alloy that showed the stars above. Nathan had always thought it was beautiful. Now, it just looked cold. High Arbiter Zorvan of the Valith sat at the highest tier. He was tall and thin, with gray skin stretched tight over sharp bones. His 4 eyes watched Nathan and Laura approach the central podium with the calm patience of someone who believed he had already won. Nathan stepped aside and let Laura speak. She activated her datapad and projected the files onto the chamber's main display. Documents appeared in glowing text. Audio clips played. Names, dates, signatures. The partition accords laid bare for every species to see. The chamber went silent. Not the comfortable silence of agreement. The terrible silence of a truth that no one wanted to hear. Laura finished and looked up at Zorvan. Would the High Arbiter like to explain? Zorvan did not flinch. He did not even blink. He leaned forward slightly and spoke in his low, smooth voice. The partition accords are a necessary restructuring of galactic territory. Humanity has occupied systems far beyond its capacity to develop or defend them. The Council has a responsibility to ensure that resources are used for the benefit of all species, not hoarded by one. A murmur ran through the chamber. Nathan watched the faces of the other representatives. Some looked uncomfortable, some looked away, but none of them looked surprised. They already knew. "These systems are ours," Nathan said. "We settled them, we built on them, we defended them." Zorvan tilted his head. "You were given permission to settle them. Permission can be revised." Laura stepped forward. "This is theft. You are stealing sovereign territory from a council member." "We are correcting an imbalance," Zorvan said. "Nothing more." The vote came quickly. Zorvan called for it before Nathan could object. The question was simple. Did the Council support the partition accords? 11 species voted yes. 4 abstained. Not a single one voted no. Nathan stood there and watched the numbers appear on the display. 11-0, with 4 sitting on the fence. 60 years of diplomacy, cooperation, and good faith, and this was what it came to. Not a war, not even an argument. Just a vote, clean and quiet, that erased everything humanity had built. A pair of Valeth security officers appeared at the podium. Commander Cole, Ambassador Beckett, your access to Nexus Prime has been suspended. Please return to your vessel. Laura looked at Nathan. He could see the fury in her eyes, but also something else. Determination. They walked out of the chamber without another word. The doors closed behind them with a soft hiss. Their footsteps echoed on the metal floor. On the shuttle back to the ardent horizon, Nathan sat in silence for a long time. Laura sat across from him, staring at her datapad, already composing messages and drafting reports. The shuttle hummed around them. Finally, Nathan opened a secure channel. The encryption was the highest grade Earth had. The signal bounced through 7 relay points before it reached its destination. The face that appeared on the screen belonged to Admiral Greg Patterson, commander of the United Earth Defense Command. He was an older man with a square jaw and gray hair cut short. His eyes were calm but hard. "Admiral," Nathan said, "they sold us out, sir." Patterson did not react. He had clearly been expecting this. He looked at Nathan for a moment, then at Laura, then back at Nathan. "How bad?" Patterson asked. "Total. They are taking everything, every system, every colony." The vote was 11-0. Patterson nodded slowly. He reached for something off-screen. Nathan heard a series of soft beeps. Authorization codes being entered. "Protocol Ember is now active," Patterson said. "All human citizens in Council space are to be recalled immediately. Every ship, every station, every outpost. We are pulling out." Laura leaned forward. "Admiral, if we leave, they will take everything we built out there." Patterson looked at her. "They already have, Ambassador. The only question now is whether our people are still standing on it when they do." The channel closed. Nathan leaned back in his seat and stared at the ceiling of the shuttle. Somewhere behind them, Nexus Prime grew smaller and smaller, until it was just another point of light among the stars. The recall began within the hour. Across the galaxy, human ships turned around. Human colonies started packing. Human voices went quiet on channels that had carried them for 60 years. The Council did not try to stop them. Why would they? They had already gotten what they wanted. Or so they thought.